Do you like scrambled eggs? How about cheesy scrambled eggs? If you're not sure what those are, then please stick around and watch this episode of Out Loud Geek. Hi, and welcome to another edition of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss a variety of topics, including science fiction, fantasy, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Today on this episode of Out Loud Geek, I'm going to show you how to prepare one of my favorite breakfast dishes, which is cheesy scrambled eggs. The secret to doing good cheesy scrambled eggs is knowing when to put the cheese into the scrambled eggs. So this morning what I'm going to do is start with 4 eggs, which I will beat in this bowl. Fortunately, I spilled a little bit there on the side, which I will clean up in a moment. So there are the 4 broken eggs. And now I'm going to wash my hands, because when you handle raw egg, it's always a good idea to wash your hands in case there's any salmonella present. Anytime you're working in the kitchen, always expect to have a mess, to some extent. And now I'm going to beat the eggs. To do this, I'm simply going to use a small fork. You can use a whisk, but you can also just use a small fork. It's just as easy. And those are sufficiently beaten eggs now. Now I just have to prepare the pan. So now I have brought out my medium-sized frying pan, which is roughly 9 inches across. And I'm going to put the stove, at around roughly a third of the way up to high. You don't want to put it too high, because obviously you don't want to burn the eggs. So I'm also going to be turning on the ventilation fan, which you might hear very slightly in the video. Now that the pan is starting to heat, I'm going to put a little bit of cooking spray onto the surface. Even though this is a non-stick pan, I still like to use a small amount of the cooking spray. Okay, the pan is now sufficiently heated. So we get the bowl of the beaten eggs and just pour them on in. And it'll take a moment for the egg to actually start to cook on the bottom. Now, a very important thing here is that some people will think, oh, you just put the cheese in right now if you're going to do cheesy scrambled eggs. That is not the case. While the eggs are still in this very liquefied state, if you were to put the cheese in now, it would just completely melt and then totally blend in with the eggs. And when that happens, you often lose a lot of the flavor from the cheese itself. So don't put the cheese in before the eggs are actually mostly cooked. That is the secret. So we just have to wait a moment for the eggs to actually cook. And I can test it out now by seeing, is there anything? Oh, there's a little bit. It's just starting to form a small amount of cooking on the bottom of the pan. So I can just now start to do the scramble, just a little bit, but I'm going to wait, let it cook up a little bit more before I proceed. It always takes a moment for the egg to completely heat up so that it can completely cook. Okay, now it's starting. There we go. So you just carefully stir it to scramble the eggs as they cook. If you were going to do an omelet, you would not be doing this. You would let the egg cook into basically what looks kind of like a pancake. There are other ways you can scramble eggs, such as shaking the pan. I've seen that technique used, but I've never tried that. Now, right now, you might think, well, is it time to put the cheese in? The answer is no. The eggs are still far too runny to even consider adding the cheese yet. You want them to be far more cooked than they currently are. You don't want them to be completely hard, but getting them to a reasonably cooked level to where there's very little runniness is about the ideal state to start putting in the cheese. And the cheese that I'm going to be using today is a grated mix of cheddar and Monterey Jack. I find that that works very, very well for cheesy scrambled eggs. These eggs are now sufficiently cooked. Now, how cheesy you want them to be is entirely up to you. I generally grab a handful of the grated cheese and then just sprinkle it fairly liberally over the cooked eggs, or partially cooked eggs, I should say. And now you can start blending the eggs in. Rather, you can start blending the eggs with the cheese. At this stage, the cheese has this nice, stringy tendency. I don't know how well that's coming out yet on camera, but hopefully you can see the stringiness of the cheese. And you don't actually have to do that much cooking at this point. The eggs are cooked. What you're essentially doing is simply melting the cheese throughout the eggs. That's what makes them cheesy and makes them taste so good. As you can see, they have a tendency to be a little sticky now because of the cheese. And those are done cooking, I do believe. There's a little bit of wad of cheese there. I'll mix that around a little bit more. Okay. Now they are done cooking. So I'm going to turn off the stove and I'm going to move the frying pan off of the heat. And now here is the plated scrambled eggs, cheesy scrambled eggs, I should say. And I'm going to reach over and take a small sample of it onto the fork. And it may be hard to see, but there's some cheese. Basically, you can see the cheese throughout the egg, and it's still a little bit stringy. That's what gives it its very good flavor. So if you want to try something really good for breakfast, I highly recommend cheesy scrambled eggs. I'll talk to you next time on another episode of OutLoudGeek. Thank you for watching today. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to press the like button below. And if you'd like to see more of our videos in the future, please subscribe to our YouTube channel right now by clicking on the subscribe button. If you'd like to leave a comment, please feel free to post one below. See you next time on OutLoudGeek.